Your father put a tracking device on your car because he loves you, you should be grateful, not paranoid. My mother said this with complete sincerity while sipping her morning coffee, as if secretly monitoring her 28-year-old daughter's every movement was just another expression of parental care. That's the moment I realized my family's definition of love had always been spelled control, and I'd been reading from the wrong dictionary my entire life, but was I brave enough to close the book entirely? Growing up in the Garrison household meant growing up in a fortress disguised as a home. My parents, Robert and Diane, weren't obviously abusive, no bruises to explain, no screaming matches for neighbors to report. Instead, they practiced a suffocating brand of love that wrapped around you like silk scarves, beautiful and soft until you realized they were cutting off your air. "We only want what's best for you, Natalie," was the family motto, spoken whenever I showed signs of independent thought. "Want to go to a friend's sleepover? We only want what's best for you," and those parents seem permissive. "Interested in studying art? We only want what's best for you," and artists starve. Dating someone they hadn't pre-approved? "We only want what's best for you, and he's not from a good family." By 18, I'd internalized their voices so completely I couldn't tell where their wants ended and mine began. I went to the college they chose, majored in business like they suggested, lived at home to save money, read, remain under supervision. My younger brother Tyler had rebelled early, fought loudly, and been essentially exiled by 16, sent to military school, then barely spoken of except in cautionary tales. My sister Lauren had taken a different route, becoming so perfectly compliant she'd essentially disappeared into their expectations, a ghost of a person who only existed as an extension of their will. I was the middle path, obedient enough to avoid Tyler's fate, independent enough to avoid Lauren's. It was exhausting, living in the gray area between submission and selfhood, but I told myself this was normal. All families were complicated. All parents were protective. All love came with conditions. The tracking device shouldn't have surprised me. I'd found it during a routine oil change, the mechanic holding up the small black box with confusion. "This yours?" he'd asked, and I'd known immediately what it was, who'd put it there, and why I was supposed to pretend it was reasonable. "Dad's just worried about my safety," I told my roommate Keiko when I finally moved out at 25, a battle that had taken 2 years of careful planning and strategic emotional warfare. "He watches the news too much." "Natalie," she said carefully, "my dad worries too. He texts to make sure I got home safe. He doesn't secretly track my vehicle like I'm a criminal on parole. But leaving physically was easier than leaving psychologically. I'd check in multiple times a day, report my activities, ask permission for decisions I had every right to make alone. The guilt was a constant companion. They'd given me life, raised me, loved me in their way. Didn't I owe them access to that life, input on how I lived it, control over who I became? "Family is everything," my mother would remind me during our mandatory weekly dinners. "People who abandon family end up alone." Tyler had been alone for 10 years now, building a life in Oregon we knew nothing about. His name was poison in their house, proof of what happened when you chose yourself over family. Lauren, married now to a man our parents had essentially selected, sat at these dinners like a warning of the opposite extreme, present but absent, smiling but hollow, the perfect daughter who'd forgotten she was also a person. The breaking point came gradually, then suddenly. I'd started therapy at Keiko's insistence, expecting to work on my anxiety, only to discover the anxiety had a source. And that source sat at the head of our family dinner table. "Boundaries aren't betrayal," Dr. Williams said during one session. "Autonomy isn't abandonment. You're allowed to be a separate person from your parents." "But they love me," I'd argue. "They just show it differently. Love doesn't require surveillance. Care doesn't demand control. What you're describing isn't protective, it's possessive." The words rattled around my brain for weeks. Possessive. Like I was property, not a person. Like their investment in raising me came with compound interest in the form of eternal ownership. I started small. Declining a weekly dinner because of other plans. Answering, "How was your day?" with "fine" instead of detailed reports. Changing my passwords after discovering my mother had been reading my emails, just to stay connected. Each tiny boundary was met with massive resistance. "You're pulling away from us," my father accused during one confrontation. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done for me?" I shot back, surprising myself with the anger. "Like putting a tracker on my car? Like reading my private emails? Like treating me like a possession instead of a person?" "We're your parents," my mother said, as if that explained everything. "We have a right to know about your life." "No," I said, the word feeling foreign but necessary. "You don't." The explosion was nuclear. I was ungrateful, selfish, corrupted by outside influences, therapy, probably on drugs. I wasn't, definitely making terrible decisions, I was making my own decisions, and breaking their hearts, by existing independently. This is about that therapist, isn't it? My father raged. Filling your head with ideas about boundaries and autonomy. We're your family, Natalie. Your blood. That therapist is just someone you pay. Someone I pay to help me understand why I panic every time I make a decision without consulting you first, I countered. Someone who helps me see that love shouldn't feel like surveillance. If you can't appreciate our love, my mother said coldly, perhaps you don't deserve it. There it was, the threat that had kept me compliant for 28 years. Behave or lose us. Submit or be orphaned. Choose yourself and choose loneliness. Okay, I said quietly. Then I guess I don't deserve it. Walking out that night felt like stepping off a cliff. They'd trained me to believe the world outside their control was dangerous, that I couldn't survive without their constant guidance, that choosing myself meant choosing isolation. The programming ran deep. I drove home checking my mirrors obsessively, half expecting the tracker to have been replaced, their need to control stronger than my need for freedom. The first few months were brutal. They alternated between siege warfare and total silence. Love bombing followed by ice ages. Guilt trips disguised as concern. Flying monkeys in the form of relatives calling to tell me how I was killing my parents, how selfish I was being, how I'd regret this when they were gone. Your mother cries every night, Aunt Patricia informed me. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. How can you do this to them? I'm not doing anything to them, I said, practicing the script Dr. Williams and I had rehearsed. I'm doing something for me. Same thing, she huffed. Family means sacrifice. Family means mutual respect, I corrected. And there's nothing mutual about our relationship. Lauren was the surprising casualty. Without me as a buffer, the full weight of their attention turned to her. She called me crying one night, begging me to come back. I can't breathe, she sobbed. They're suffocating me. They want to track my phone now, read my texts with David. They say it's because they're worried, because of what happened with you. What happened with me is I chose to be a whole person, I said gently. You can too. I'm not strong like you. I'm not strong, Lauren. I'm just tired. There's a difference. She hung up on me, but called back a week later. Then a week after that. Slowly, carefully, she started setting her own boundaries. Baby steps, saying no to their suggestions about her marriage, pushing back on invasive questions, choosing her own hairstyle despite their disapproval. They fought her every inch, but she kept going. It's your fault, my mother accused during one of her attempted guilt calls. You're poisoning Lauren against us too. I'm showing her it's possible to love you and still be her own person, I said. If that's poison to you, what does that say about your love? The silence that followed was answer enough. Tyler reached out 6 months into our family Cold War. He'd heard through the grapevine, even exile doesn't cut all connections, about my boundaries battle. Welcome to the orphan club, he said, and I could hear the sad smile in his voice. Membership sucks, but the freedom's worth it. We talked for 3 hours. About our childhoods, comparing notes like detectives solving a cold case. About the way our parents' love always came with strings attached, puppeteers who called their manipulation protection. About how we'd been raised to believe that family meant ownership, that blood was a deed to your soul. They tell everyone I abandoned them, he said. But you can't abandon someone who never let you exist in the first place. Do you regret it? I asked. Cutting them off? I regret that it was necessary, he said carefully. I regret that they couldn't love me and let me be myself. But I don't regret choosing my life over their expectations. I have a wife now, 2 kids. They'll never meet their grandparents. But they'll also never be tracked, monitored, controlled, and called ungrateful for wanting basic autonomy. The path forward wasn't clean or easy. I went through cycles of guilt and relief, anger and grief. Some days I'd draft emails explaining everything, trying one more time to make them understand. Other days I'd block their numbers again, exhausted by another round of manipulation disguised as reconciliation. You were right about one thing, I told Dr. Williams during a session. This isn't about them changing. It's about me accepting they won't. Because that was the hardest truth, they truly believed their behavior was love. In their minds, tracking my car was protection. Reading my emails was involvement. Controlling my decisions was guidance. They couldn't see the suffocation because to them, it looked like care. I grieved then, not just for the relationship we had, but for the one we'd never have. The healthy, boundaried connection where they could love me without owning me, where I could love them without disappearing. That relationship had never existed, and accepting its impossibility felt like a death. But here, that's what they do and tell you about choosing yourself over toxic family. The space that opens up when you stop managing their emotions is vast and terrifying and beautiful. I started making decisions without committee input. Started therapy not just for family issues but for discovering who I actually was beneath their programming. Started dating someone who found it refreshing that I had boundaries, not threatening. Your parents sound intense, Marcus said after I'd explained why I wouldn't be taking him to meet them. That's one word for it. Must have been hard, walking away from that. Harder to stay, I said, meaning it. Because staying would have meant accepting that love required surveillance. That care demanded control. That family meant forever owing a debt for the crime of being born. Staying would have meant becoming Lauren, present but disappearing. Or worse, becoming them, passing on the poison to the next generation, tracking my own kids someday while calling it protection. The extended family picked sides, of course. Blood loyalty ran deep in the Garrison clan. I was ungrateful, selfish, probably mentally ill, their favorite diagnosis for anyone who chose differently. But a few cousins reached out privately, sharing their own stories of suffocation, their own dreams of boundaries. I became inadvertently the family rebel, proof that you could say no and survive. I'm thinking of moving out, my teenage cousin Beth whispered during a rare family event I attended. Mom says family stays close, but you're allowed to define what close means, I finished. Physical distance doesn't mean emotional abandonment, despite what they tell us. She nodded, hope and fear warring in her eyes. Another seed planted. Another person realizing that blood relation isn't a binding contract to accept mistreatment. Lauren eventually went low contact too, maintaining just enough connection to avoid total war but protecting her marriage and sanity. We rebuilt our relationship slowly, two refugees from the same emotional dictatorship learning to be sisters by choice rather than obligation. They still don't understand, she told me recently. They think we're punishing them. We're not punishing them. We're protecting ourselves. There's a difference. Is there? To them? No, I admitted. But I can't live my life based on their definitions anymore. My parents still send cards on birthdays and holidays, formal, stilted things that pretend we a normal family temporarily separated by distance rather than a toxic system disrupted by boundaries. Sometimes they include checks I don't cash, attempts to maintain control through obligation. Sometimes they include photos of us as children, emotional manipulation disguised as nostalgia. I keep the photos but reframe them, literally and figuratively. That little girl in the pictures deserved parents who could love her without owning her. She deserved to grow up believing her thoughts, feelings, and choices mattered. She deserved to become herself without apology or tracker devices. I'm giving her that now, retroactively. Every boundary honored, every decision made independently, every day lived free from surveillance is a gift to that younger self who believed love meant control because that's all she'd known. Any regrets? Dr. Williams asked during our final session. About walking away? No. About it being necessary? Every day. Because that's the complexity of escaping toxic family, you can simultaneously know it was right and wish it hadn't been needed. You can love people and still protect yourself from their version of love. You can honor where you came from while refusing to stay there. Tyler, Lauren, and I have our own family now, chosen, boundaried, respectful. We celebrate holidays together, our kids playing while we don't track their every move. We love without suffocating, care without controlling, maintain relationships that enhance rather than diminish. Think they'll ever understand? Lauren asked last Christmas, watching our children play freely. No, Tyler and I said simultaneously, then laughed at our shared certainty. But maybe, I added, understanding isn't the point. Maybe the point is that we understand. We know the difference between love and control, between family and ownership, between blood relation and blind loyalty. My name is Natalie Garrison. I'm the daughter who chose boundaries over blood loyalty, the sister who modeled escape, the woman who learned that being born into a family doesn't create an obligation to accept toxicity. They say I abandoned my family. I say I abandoned their dysfunction. They say I'm ungrateful for their love. I say I'm grateful to finally know what love actually looks like. They say blood is thicker than water. I say sometimes water is exactly what you need to wash yourself clean. The tracker is long gone, but the lessons remain. Love doesn't require surveillance. Family doesn't demand ownership. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for them and yourself, is refuse to participate in patterns that mistake control for care. I still check my mirror sometimes, old habits dying hard. But now I'm not looking for trackers or watching for surveillance. I'm looking forward, driving toward a life where love means freedom, family means choice, and being born somewhere doesn't mean you have to die there, literally or metaphorically. That's the gift of breaking free, discovering that the world beyond their control isn't dangerous. It's just life, waiting to be lived on your own terms. And despite their dire predictions, I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by people who love me without tracking devices, who care without controlling, who prove every day that family isn't about blood, it's about who shows up for your freedom, not just your compliance. And that family? That family is everything.